Did any of the following actually happen as described in these scary stories? Welcome to Viewer's Choice Thursday, the day when you decide which story we'll do. Here's the countdown. In last place, left over from last week, it's Dogman versus Snallygaster with 7%. Up next, Dogman, Missing Time with 8%. In third place, Dogman versus Dogman, Turf Battle, 26%. Barely edging out Dogman versus Dogman for number 2, Dogman Bigfoot, Mixed Family with 27%. And our winner for this week, with a whopping 32% of the vote, the story that you chose for me to read tonight, My Mother is a Werewolf. The story begins in a moment. There's a new poll up right now on our community page. Be sure to make your choice known. And now, without further ado, My Mother is a Werewolf. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I hadn't seen my mother since before the pandemic, and apparently a lot has changed since the last time we were together. For one thing, my mother is now a werewolf. Before you think I've been smoking the wacky weed, let me go back to the beginning and tell this all to you in order. Some of you will probably still think I'm full of what makes the grass grow, but I've got to tell somebody about this, and you're elected. My friends either knew my mother when we were growing up, or else are not close enough for me to reveal something this private, and this bizarre too. I'm going to reveal it to the public, but I'm going to do it in an anonymous manner so as not to destroy my job and my life, and also to cut my poor lycanthropic mother a little slack as well. She didn't choose this lifestyle, at least not as far as I know. I think it was thrust upon her, but I'm getting ahead of myself, so let me tell you this as it happened to me. My mom was always a throwback, even in the 70s when I was a kid. She seemed like a 50s housewife in the 70s and a 70s housewife in the 90s, if that makes any sense. She was never interested in anything men were talking about. She was interested in lady stuff. She wore pink. She would say "aww" when babies came on the TV screen. She loved to bake, and she loved to sew. When women's liberation came around, she rebelled against it, and she avoided liberated women as often as she could, which was less and less often as they became the majority. When my father passed on just after 9/11, Mom sat at home grieving for him for years. Around 2009, I urged her to start seeing other men. She laughed at the idea at first, since she was in her 60s by that time. I told her 60 is the new 40, and encouraged her to try a dating app, I forget which one. She soon discovered that lots of men in their 60s loved the idea of dating a woman who knew how to cook and clean and so forth. She was in demand for the first time since she married Dad at the age of 20. It went to her head a little bit, and she told me stories that shocked me of how she would make the men compete with each other for her attention. She said that on weekends, she would have one of her boyfriends washing her windows, another cleaning the gutters, and a third mowing her lawn. At first, she would invite them all to stay for dinner, but this inevitably led to loud arguments. After a while, she would allow only one of the men to stay for dinner, whichever had pleased her the most on that day. I have to say, I found this change in character somewhat unnerving. It was like she was becoming a power-mad narcissist. That all changed when she met a man that we can call Quentin, which is not his real name. I never met Quentin, partially because Mom lost interest in keeping touch with me once her romance with the reportedly very handsome and macho Quentin began. Quentin was even more old school than Mom. He was dashing and a charmer, but he was also commanding and expected his dinner on time every night. She seemed to like him more than the men who jumped at her every command, and soon the two of them were spending every waking moment together. Doing what, I never knew, because as soon as COVID hit us all, Quentin dumped Mom and left for parts unknown. I wanted to go and visit her, but she insisted I stay away. I thought it was because she believed in all the fear-mongering on TV. It wasn't until last month that I finally got invited to come see her again, and boy did I find a lot of shocking changes had taken place in her life. Not only in her, but in her very house itself. As soon as I walked in, I noticed the changes. First of all, the smell was no longer dainty, filled with flowery scents from candles and room deodorizers. Now, it smelled like meat. To be more specific, meat that had been left out for a while. I won't go so far as to say it smelled like a butcher's shop, because it didn't, but by my mother's standards, it still smelled like meat. I immediately took a look at Mom, wondering if she was still 100% all there. Her facial expression seemed normal enough, but I decided to watch her closely to see if she might need one kind of help or maybe another. The next thing I noticed was how her idea of house decoration had changed. Rather than little framed paintings of cute animals, she had mounted heads of deer, rabbits, mountain lions, and other real-life animals mounted and hanging on nearly every wall. That's not to mention the stuffed animals around on the floor. The woman I grew up with would have found such things to be sickening. She would never have wanted stuffed animals in her home. This set off alarm bells in my head, and I decided to ask her about them, but not right off the bat. First, we would have lunch and make small talk for a while, get to know each other again. Of course, I hadn't changed at all. The only difference in my life since she last saw me was that now I do my work at home or wherever I can carry my company's laptop to. I have the same friends, I'm interested in the same hobbies, and I watch the same kinds of shows and movies. Mom, on the other hand, had clearly been through some sort of growth period, or else a period of devolution, I wasn't sure, and I knew I needed to be gentle about finding out which of the two had occurred. Over sliced mystery meat sandwiches, Mom started to bring me up to date in all that had changed in her life. After all, things had drastically altered for her multiple times since we last hung out together. She had fallen hard for that guy Quentin, and then she had been dumped by him. I asked if she was dating, but she said she would wait till she didn't have to wear a face diaper and avoid holding hands. That was a surprisingly aggressive thing for someone like my mom to say. I had assumed she would be... Well, let's face it, I expected my mom would be a total conformist to be wearing 3 or 4 masks when she came to greet me at the door. I don't want to say that she was germ-phobic or a chicken little when she raised me, but I will go so far as to say that she was a clean freak. For her to speak so cavalierly about a pandemic showed a kind of confidence and emotional strength that I never knew she had. So far, although surprising and jarring, none of her changes seem to be all that negative, at least in my opinion. But my alarm bells inside my head were still ringing, so I kept my eyes and ears open so that I could understand better who this woman I had known my entire life had morphed into. We took a walk out behind her house, which was not the house I grew up in, but the one she and Dad moved into when I left for college. It has very few memories for me, but I had stayed over there on holidays and also for a few months after my graduation while I saved up to get my own place. I always liked the peacefulness of Mom's backyard garden, which was mainly composed of low-to-the-ground flowering plants. She had mostly carried them over from our old house, and those original plants she had carried home from the mountains surrounding our town. I think all those plants were still there, but they were harder to view, as Mom seemed to have planted all variety of thorny rose bushes and other taller plants in what might have at first been a logical manner. To me, it looked like the rose plants had taken over and were growing haphazardly and in a sort of crazy fashion. Well, let's say they grew wild, and they probably could have used some pruning. I had to be careful not to get scratched, and I pulled down my shades to prevent getting a thorn in my eye. That's how tall the plants were growing. To me, this was something I felt a bit worried about. This might actually be a sign of her mind becoming unfocused. She seemed so invigorated when walking through the wild rose patch that had once been her tame garden, though. She laughed and called each different shade of rose a different personal pet name, and she told me how their personalities differed from each other. I know that sounds crazy, but the way she laughed while regaling me with stories about her roses made me feel at ease about it. If she can laugh about how silly she sounds, then she must still be self-aware and not behaving in an obsessive way. She just really enjoyed the roses, and she felt that some grew tall, while others snaked out from side to side, each expressing his or her personal wants and needs. She loved them all equally, and she loved them for their differences. I found it charming and not scary or crazy at all. When we reached the back of the garden and stood at the tree line leading into the woods and swamps behind her property, though, Mom stood and stared into the woods, seemingly in a trance of some sort. I tried to see what she was seeing, look where she was looking, but it all just seemed to be undifferentiated woodland to me. Finally, I asked her what she was looking at and got no response. I turned to her and asked again, and she reacted with a start, as though she had forgotten I was even there. Laughing at herself, she told me she was becoming a ditzy old lady, and that she now had these recurring spells. "What kind of spells, Mom?" I asked, trying to hide how concerned this made me. "Oh, just mild ones like that, except for..." She trailed off, not wanting to finish the sentence that she had started. "Except for what, Mom?" I asked. And she chuckled and said, "Oh, don't worry, you'll probably be gone before then." Gone before what? I couldn't decipher what she was talking about. Changing the subject before I could query her further, she told me that as you get older, things change and break down. You can either be a worrywart and run to the doctor over every new pain and ache, or you can take your vitamins, get your sunshine and exercise, and then watch as most of the minor problems take care of themselves. Even though I didn't know what was going to happen to Mom that I would be gone for, I knew I wanted to find out. Since I could do my work from anywhere with an internet connection, I asked her if I could stick around just one more week. Running to her wall calendar in the kitchen, Mom hemmed and hawed about giving me an answer. She said she'd have to think about it, and I knew I would be imposing. Still, I felt I needed to find out what kind of spells she was having that she didn't want me to know about. Call me nosy, but I only have one parent left, and I'm hoping she can live till she's 110 if possible. I guess I'm more greedy and selfish than nosy, really. So, over the course of a few days, I got the story out of her about this fellow, Quentin. He was a hunter, I was informed. Were those his hunting trophies mounted and stuffed around the house? No, she said those were all her kills. I needed more information. When and how had my mother become a hunter? And if she was a hunter, where was her hunting equipment? I had not seen anything of that sort anywhere around the place. No rifle, no ammo, no camouflage hunting clothes, no signs at all that my mother had taken up this oldest of sports and pastimes. That was when Mom cracked and blew up at me. She raised her voice and informed me that she believed in gun safety. That's why she didn't leave dangerous things laying around the house. Those are tools, not playthings, she bellowed at me, her face turning redder than I had seen in my entire life. Even when she caught me stealing candy from the candy store as a kid, she didn't get that angry at me. I was truly stunned by this outburst, and Mom immediately looked embarrassed and apologized. "It's just that you need to respect my privacy," she insisted as nicely as she could, while still sounding firm about it. "I'm your mother, not your property." She meant to push me back and shame me slightly, but instead she just confirmed to me that she was hiding something. Something big. Eventually, Mom asked me to be gone from her house by a certain date. I wondered what it was about that date that made it so special, and I set up a chat with an old friend who knew my mom from the old days. My friend pointed out that was the night of the full moon, which at first I disregarded as irrelevant. Mom had gone through menopause years back, and I didn't think she had any concern over the cycles of the moon any longer. My friend suggested I leave when she wanted me to, but leave something behind that I would need to return for. Then, on the evening of the full moon, I should show up unannounced to retrieve my property and check out the scene. I liked the plan, but I could go at one better since my mom had given me my own set of keys for the place way back before the pandemic. Of course, they were to be used in emergencies and not to spy on her, but desperate times call for desperate measures. On the day in question, I snuck around to the back of the house right around sundown and was about to let myself in when I caught sight of my mother inside. My first instinct was to slink away and skulk around to the front door instead, but from what I could see, my mother was having some sort of an episode. She seemed to be suffering from an attack, or maybe she was having an epileptic fit. Quickly unlocking the door and letting myself in, I rushed to Mom's side, only to find her on the floor, growling, in a deep voice, as though she were possessed by a demon. She looked different than I'd ever seen her, and she was foaming at the mouth. For some reason, I thought she was choking, and I moved behind her to attempt to give her the Heimlich maneuver. Once I had come around to that side, however, she turned, suddenly, and looked up at me. Gone were her beautiful brown eyes, and in their place were the eyes of a stressed-out wild beast, pupils so dilated that they reflected the ambient light back at me. Human eyes literally cannot do that. She pulled her lips back and revealed teeth that belonged in the mouth of a movie monster. Teeth so large that they wouldn't have even fit in the mouth of the woman who raised me. This was no longer my mother, and it continued to morph in front of my eyes, growing hair all over its face. First there was a kind of a 5 o'clock shadow, and soon the face wasn't even human any longer. I ran away from her toward the stairs, and as I climbed them, I watched the still mutating beast follow me as best it could, while still painfully transforming into... what? Barely getting into the guest room and locking the door before the beast slammed into it, I listened as I heard what sounded like a rabid dog, furiously trying to bang and scratch and bite and tear its way inside. There was nothing human out there in the hallway. There was only some kind of prehistoric beast where my mother had been. After failing to get in at me, the dog thing began whimpering in that way that dogs do, and I heard its nails tapping down the hall toward the stairway. I heard the kitchen door swing open and shut, and through the window in the second-floor guest room, I watched as the beast that was once my mother tore through the rose garden out back, entering the dark woods and disappearing from my view. What would you do in that situation? I didn't know what to do. My mind felt like it had been stretched into silly putty. Do I call the police? Do I call or text a friend? In either case, what exactly was I supposed to tell them? That my mother had become a werewolf? After sitting there immobile for some time, I bravely let myself out of the room and heroically drove home with my figurative tail between my legs. I no longer thought of myself as the big dog in our family. I spent that night in emotional torment, unsure if I should go back to my mother's house or not. Was I wrong to leave? Would I be wrong to go back? I think I fell asleep around 5 a.m., and I woke up around 7, just as upset as I was before. I got up my courage, and I headed over to my mom's place around when I knew she was usually preparing breakfast. When I got there, The memory of how I'd been chased upstairs by some kind of werewolf thing that used to be my mother came back in a rush, and I didn't have the nerve to ring the doorbell. I snuck around the back again and peeked into the kitchen through the window to see what I could see. "Why are you spying on me, dear?" came my mother's voice from behind me, scaring me so much I thought I was going to have a heart attack. "Who is spying on who?" I asked, and Mom chuckled. "Whom, dear? Whom?" She was carrying a large tomato from her garden and invited me in. I was just about to make breakfast, she told me. "Eggs and fresh tomato with fresh rabbit meat I caught myself," she informed me. "Oh, you caught the rabbit yourself?" I asked nervously. "Yeah," she responded in a happy mood. "I went hunting yesterday." "Oh, did you?" "Yes, honey, that's why I wanted you out of the house," she told me, "so I could go hunting." It didn't seem that she remembered anything about the night before. She didn't seem to know that I had come over while she was transforming. She didn't seem aware that she had chased me upstairs to the guest room. I don't know if she had much or any memory of her other life as a werewolf. Obviously, she had enough awareness to shoo me away before it happened, but I don't think she remembered much of what happened while she was in her other state. Instead, I got regaled with a fake story about how she doesn't want me to know where she keeps her firearms and hunting equipment. Hunting, to her, I was told, is a private thing. I just shook my head and pretended that I believed her. I wasn't really sure what else to do about it. I mean, she's not sick. She does not have dementia. She doesn't really need my help. In fact, she's stronger than she ever was before, even in her youth. What she mainly needed from me was space to live her life the way she now chose to. It's up to me to accept this new reality. And that reality is, my mother is a werewolf. Well, we hope you enjoyed that story that you voted for. Don't forget to vote for next Thursday's episode. The poll is up now on our community page. Right now, I'd like to thank this episode's executive producer, Jeff Underhill. For a while he left us, now he's back. His return picks up the slack. For this episode he foots the bill. He's a man of greatness, Jeff Underhill. Please join me in welcoming back the great and wonderful Jeff Underhill, producer of tonight's episode. Mr. U is a $10 channel member, which means he gets to watch our secret Sunday Uncensored episodes, plus our over 15 hours of archived secret uncensored stories, and he gets to watch selected new episodes before the public does. You can join for as little as 99 cents, and each tier has different advantages. All you have to do is join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com, or do what Jeff Underhill did and simply click the join link under this or any of our videos to become a channel member. Here's PQ Ribber as Dr. Death to explain in greater detail. Doctor?
Thanks for watching till the end. If you liked what you saw, please consider clicking like on the video or sharing it. You can become a channel member by clicking the join link below. Then you can check our community page to find the links to 10 hours or more of secret, uncensored Dogman stories too wild to be told on this channel. Your other option is to join our paid subscribers club at peterbernard.com. That's Peter's homemade club, where he will personally email you the links as well as occasional secret club messages. You may also be included as an executive producer in a future episode. You have a scary experience you want to tell us about? You can email us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com, or else call our Scary Stories voicemail hotline at 804-LESS-SCARY. The machine cuts off every few minutes, so if you have a long story, please keep calling back and we'll piece it together later on. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.